So good morning, and it's a real pleasure to be back at the MAI Business Conference to discuss growth. And it was at a panel session last year that we talked about the importance and the opportunity that could come from bringing the creative industries closer to motorsport to re-energize and grow and sustain the entertainment business which underpins it. Since then, UK Research and Innovation has launched the Audience of the Future competition with a dedicated strand for large-scale demonstrators. And I stood down from Innovate UK in May, but it's a pleasure to be back here to talk about some of the very diverse aspects that come together in this new grouping. Technology and people, fans and audiences, how do we bridge between them, and how do we create business growth from that? Now, I suspect a few people in the audience might have been at the Rolling Stones conference in the O2, along with 80,000 other people back in May. And if not there, I'm pretty sure that most people in the audience will have been to a concert of some type or a festival of some type over the last year. And if we look at the data that comes from the United States on music revenues, 55% of the total revenues for music in the United States now come from live music tickets and live music sponsorship. Incredible change on the digital dimension, going from CDs to downloads, from downloads now to streaming as the dominant form of digital consumption, but people are keener than ever to participate in live events. Sometimes it's very straightforward to see how things come together. Technology and fans, we can see the opportunity in a reasonably straightforward way because it's often about a better functional performance for people to consume their music. Similarly with audiences, we can see that people and audiences can come together in straightforward opportunities to create more revenue because of the emotional engagement that those events create. It gets a little bit harder when we look at some of the new generation technologies and how they might actually create audiences at scale, because it needs to be a collective experience, not an individual experience. And it's also tricky at times to see how some celebrities might be able to reach out more to individual fans. Not everyone that's a fan of the Rolling Stones will be a fan of Ronnie Wood's artwork. But what do we have? We have here the opportunity to think about all kinds of different inspirational experiences, and I'd like to take you through some different ones so that we can think about here. The Spitfire. Now, that's a lot closer to a competitive engineering world. It's an iconic aircraft. One of its celebrated pilots, Jeffrey Wellham, recalled, "You didn't get into a Spitfire, you strapped it onto you. A Spitfire could almost think what you wanted to do, and it would do it." You know you have something special from a performance perspective when the user, the pilot, is its #1 fan. But it's a very different aeroplane, the BAE Hawk trainers, which entertain en masse people that rarely give aerospace a second thought, thrilled by the collective performance of what is going on in front of their very eyes. It's not the individual performance they're focused on, even though those are incredible. It's the collective performance and the effect which they can easily understand from the colored diesel pouring out of the back of their jets. And by contrast to Ronnie Wood, this is Charles Rennie's Mackintosh Hill House in Scotland, an incredible piece of Art Nouveau experience formed by him and his wife, Margaret MacDonald. Yet at the time, even though he had a publisher, Walter Blackie, who is his #1 UK fan and patron, he died in poverty and relative obscurity in the United Kingdom, even though he's celebrated as the leader of the Glasgow style now 150 years on. This is some of the challenges that we face. And if we go back to the Olympic Stadium for a different example, back in 2012 and the double gold medal victories of Mo Farah, we witnessed the collective engagement of an entire nation, a little bit like Tuesday night and no doubt Saturday as well. And I happened to be in the audience for the 5,000 meters, and I can honestly say that I've never heard a noise like it. It was just like pure white noise volume as the entire stadium engaged with the race and with the challenge of Mo Farah working his way through the field to the front. If we switch to the digital world, we are in a different domain. Here, things scale effortlessly. And as a result, audiences can scale easily for the very best ideas. Interesting to compare for a moment then and contrast two recent Facebook acquisitions, well, not so recent really, WhatsApp and Instagram. WhatsApp, simple and effective as a way of communicating, not just one-for-one, but between groups, between families, between communities, and I would bet that almost everyone in this room has WhatsApp on their mobile phone. Instagram, a simple and effective way of sharing your emotional experiences, and if you're a celebrity, an effortless way for you or your staff to engage with massive audiences. But if you were sitting there in charge of Facebook, would you have placed the bets? $19 billion for WhatsApp, $1 billion for Instagram. And which one of those would have given you the best return? Well, it may surprise you to know that those that betted on Instagram would have got the very best returns. From that $1 billion investment, it now earns $8 billion per annum in global advertising, nearly $1 billion per annum here in the United Kingdom. Emotional engagement pays. WhatsApp, sorry, I'll come back to Chris in a minute. WhatsApp has done well. Its revenues are $5 billion per annum, but it's had to abandon all subscriptions and create a user base of 1.5 billion, because it's much harder for advertising to engage into a collective performance than it is to an emotional experience. Let's spend a moment to think about Chris Froome. Here, the photograph from May the 25th, when he started the toughest stage of the Giro in 4th place, 3 minutes, 22 seconds behind the leader. An incredible feat of cycling from which he emerged as the stage lead by 40 seconds, setting him up for outright victory. Why did they have such an incredible engagement? This drew in people who would never otherwise care about a bike race. It did it because it was a human endeavor, fighting from behind to take the lead, mixed with an ongoing controversy about how that was achieved, emotionally connecting with a broader audience. Technology absolutely played its part, starting when Team Sky did, by accident, a reconnoiter of the climb that Chris was going to be doing. In fact, at the time, they didn't even know it was part of the Giro. But they worked out from that reconnaissance that actually there was a lot of time that could be made going both up and down that toughest stage. So when they were faced with this situation, the decision was to find a very innovative way of getting Chris to the front. And as we've seen from the recent publications, it was all about feeding Chris enough energy every 10 minutes to go straight up that hill with an incredible performance. That actually required an engagement of the whole team. They needed people to feed him every 2 kilometers. Everybody involved in the team was engaged to try and work out logistically how it happens. You can see how this story is building in terms of engagement and emotion and atmosphere, and as a result, it became a headline news. And now, yesterday, the data itself has become a part of the story, with Team Sky taking the unprecedented step of releasing a cache of data to BBC Sport covering his diet, his power output, his heart rate from the race. There is an immense interest in how this was achieved. And the motorsport industry is incredibly privileged. You have amazing instrumentation. You have volumes of data. And as a consequence, you are really well set up to create new perspectives. But they must be perspectives about people, as well as technology, about audiences, as well as fans. And when we think about that, in simplistic terms, the technology in the car becomes a natural focus for the fans, the race itself, about the collective performance between the individuals. The excitement becomes the focal point of the race. The driver will obviously also feature heavily into that as an individual engagement between the people and the fans. And the stories need to come through if you really want to break through and hit the headline news. And that all requires, on the people side, a more colorful set of data, hence the annotation on the bottom half of the chart. But more importantly than that, for such a competitive industry, one of the biggest challenges you have is to work out how to share that data. How can you take enough of that data to grow the entire business so that everyone prospers, as well as maintain enough data to keep a competitive advantage within the teams and for the drivers? And I think it's interesting that organizations such as the MIA might have interesting roles to play in brokering, honestly, that data across teams, across drivers, in order to feed the industry to take it forward. There is no doubt that the industry already knows everything it needs to know about its cars or is striving to, and therefore is adequately committed to work out how for teams to engage with fans on what's happening to their cars and the decisions they want to make about it. There's no doubt that the celebrity drivers already worked out how to leverage that in order to communicate more emotionally with their fans and to correct additional business. The interesting bit then is working out how can we move to where a subset of that data from the teams about the cars and the drivers can feed into shared data streams, enabling new experiences, creating business growth, which for a wider audience is about being as thrilling as an aerobatic display of the red arrows and as heart-stopping as Mo Farah working his way through a field to win the 5,000 kilometers. We're very fortunate that the government has put its money behind this and is in fact on the Audience of the Future invested in 2 competitions, one of which just finished. So if you didn't participate in Design Foundations, it has gone. But the hope is that the outputs from those kind of studies and investigations will generate new information. And very importantly then is the Audience of the Future demonstrators, a chance to put together novel experiences for over 100,000 people in order to test out pioneering new ways of engaging. And I'm thrilled to be able to now introduce 3 follow-on speakers in order to take us into that area and to show some of the imagination, tools and insight that can shape this topic in the future. And I'd like to welcome first to the stage Mike Rossum, Head of Innovation of Motorsport at McLaren Applied Technologies. Mike.